generational shift. Young people today, aged 13 to 26, Generation Z, have grown up with a mobile phone in their hand and with the internet. That's not necessarily all bad. It's not necessarily all bad. They can find out information. They can be in good contact with their friends and family. But they've also been called the generation of the Zoomers, in contrast to the Boomers. They're the Zoomers. But they've also been labelled the generation anxiety. And there's a lot of worry about the future. Perhaps too much information, not delivered in a way that was suitable for them at the age that they received it. They've witnessed that the world can change in a moment. COVID was a 2-year period. I've lived 52 years, so it's only 5% of my life. I've had 45 other years to balance that up since I was 5 or so. But for them, it's like a fifth of the time that they've been alive. It's a really significant change in perspective. And then there's massive new challenges to deal with. Visual social comparison, emotional online bullying, online sexual predators, sociogenic epidemics like toxic masculinity, misinformation. No wonder that the biggest need that this generation expresses is we just want someone truthfully to tell us that everything is going to be okay. And we all feel a bit of that, don't we? I'm often a bit worried. I'd quite like someone to tell me that everything is going to be okay. You know, for Christians and for the church, this is a question that we can respond to. Because our faith is in God, who made everything and came to earth to prove that though things are not okay at the moment, everything is going to be okay. And he came not only to say it, but also to prove it. Our faith isn't based on speculation or philosophical ideas or the latest trend or spirituality. It's based on Jesus, based on one who is truthful, who undeniably loves us and showed us his love. He actually laid down his life. He died for us. And he said, trust in me. I love you. Everything is going to be okay if you trust in me. And we are finding that in these times, Christianity is drawing more people back to church. Numbers of people coming to church in younger generations is growing. There are more people aged 18 to 26 who are coming to church now than there were in 2018 in a recent survey. And God is in control. People are receiving surety that God is ultimately and eternally in control. And we get the ultimate demonstration of this in Holy Week. As Leslie was saying, Jesus is on the way to an uncertain future, so it seems. But his trust is in God, who is leading him there for other reason. So let's look at the Easter story. And at each point, we're going to look who is in control here. Because there are two possible narratives. One, Jesus was not God. He was a man. He didn't do miracles. They were made up. He was an inspirational preacher who went too far and challenged the authority. He challenged the hierarchy of his time. He said some inspirational things, but eventually he was executed because he was a threat to the government. But what about the claims in the Bible? What about the claims of the people recorded here who were there with him when he walked on water? What about the claims of the people who were there with him when he took 5 loaves and 2 fish, multiplied it and fed 10,000 people, including women and children? What about the testimonies, the individual testimonies of hundreds, maybe thousands of people who actually were personally healed by him? People who were lame and then could walk. People who were blind and then could see. And what about the testimony of people whose lives were transformed by people? People trapped in greed, bitterness, rejection, addiction, anger, and despair, who turned to Jesus and found peace, generosity, kindness, hope, and love. And what about the people over the centuries who've given testimony to Jesus? People who refused to stop talking about Jesus, even if that meant they were going to their deaths. They'd rather that than dishonor him. Because there is another narrative, there is another explanation for the events of Holy Week, and that is that the Bible is true, and that Jesus really did do these miracles, that he really did bring that irrepressible peace and joy and hope and love. And that while there was pain and hardship, yes, for Jesus in this last week, he was actually enacting God's plan. He was God himself, as well as being man. And he was displaying a love like no other. Displaying a divine love to save his people, to rescue them, to snatch them from the jaws of hell, and to give them heaven. So we're going to be looking at the events of Holy Week. And to introduce it, we're going to have a half of our first film. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you. Let's look in our Bibles. Let's look at this story in more detail. Reflect on what was happening. Because on Palm Sunday, if we can have our PowerPoint, please. In Luke's Gospel, it tells us that the religious leaders were jealous of Jesus. Some of them were wanting to kill him, others just to silence him. But something else is happening, and it's completely out of their hands. Some of the Pharisees say to Jesus, "Teacher, rebuke your disciples." And Jesus replies, "I tell you that if they were quiet, the stones would cry out." There's something divine that's happening here. And then Jesus goes into the temple courts the next day. You know, because in the temple, there were courts that were for Gentiles, people who were not from the culturally Jewish. And these courts were for those people to be able to pray. But they turned those into a market because they didn't care. And they were just using those to get money. And Jesus said, "No, this is supposed to be a house of prayer." And he made a whip, and he created a big noise and he expelled them all from that space. And they went because they knew that he was acting with divine authority. And Jesus says in Luke 19, verse 46, "This house will be, it is written that this house will be a house of prayer, but you have made it a den of robbers." And then following Jesus through the story, he's betrayed by a friend. At that very moment of betrayal, just before the Last Supper, Jesus knew what was going to happen. And Jesus said, "The Son of Man will go just as it is written about him, but woe to that man who betrays the Son of Man. It would be better for him if he'd not been born." Jesus knows what's going to happen, and he stays with it. And then Jesus goes out of town for the night nearby to the Mount of Olives. He prays so hard that sweat falls from his forehead like drops of blood. But in Luke 22, Jesus says, "Your will be done." An angel from heaven appears to him and strengthens him. And then when Judas leads the temple guards to him, they ask, "Where is Jesus?" And he responds, "Who is it that you want?" They respond, "Jesus of Nazareth." And he says, "I am he." At that moment, those temple guards drew back and fell to the ground. Such was the power of God. Those words of God words of the name of God, "I am Yahweh," comes from his lips. Jesus is then in there with a scuffle, and one of the guards loses his ear. Jesus stops to heal the ear of that guard. And John tells us the name of the guard. His name was Malchus. Luke tells us that it was his right ear. Jesus says no more of this and heals the man's ear. Jesus is then beaten and mocked. The next day he's falsely tried, and Pilate says to Jesus in John 19, "Do you not realize that I have power either to free you or to crucify you?" And Jesus answers, "You would have no power over me if it were not given you from above." And then as they bang the nails through his hands, as his beaten body hangs on the cross, exhausted, Luke tells us that through the pain, he says, "Father, forgive them. They don't know what they are doing." And then on the cross, Jesus actually takes time to forgive the sins of the man who is being crucified next to him. His thought is for someone else. The thief says to him, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." Jesus answers him, "Today, truly, I tell you, you will be with me in paradise." And then from Luke 23, "It was about noon, and darkness came over the whole land until 3 p.m, for the sun stopped shining. The curtain of the temple was torn in two. Jesus cried out with a loud voice, 'Father, into your hands I commit my spirit.' And at that moment, the earth shook, rocks split, and Jesus died." The Roman centurion says, "Surely he was the Son of God." So, what do you think? Who was actually ultimately in control here? Actually, Jesus was fulfilling the prophecies written hundreds of years ago. That though he was innocent, he was dying to take the place of thousands, billions of sinners like me and like you. That we would have the possibility to be forgiven. And that is the promise of Jesus. That actually, in the end, it will be okay. Because we can place our trust in him and in his death on the cross. That we might be forgiven. As he promised that we would if we trusted in him. And next Sunday, we're going to be remembering just in case you were in any doubt, that he was raised from death. He was raised from the tomb to prove it. Can we have the second part of our video? Thank you. And so Jesus says, come to me. Come to me, all you who are burdened, and I will give you rest. Jesus says, come for me, I have died for you. I love you. I come humbly, not with force. You are in control of your response and your actions. You can choose. But know that you are choosing death or life. Know that you are choosing hell or heaven. You are choosing to be separated from me, or you are choosing to be with me for eternity. There is a better way. You can be forgiven. You can be free from your pain. You can be free from uncertainty. And you can know Jesus. There are some rulers who walk in the steps of Herod and Pilate, who oppress the innocent, who rob from the poor and give to the rich, who oppress and denigrate the vulnerable in society. They will have their moment of fake glory. They will celebrate when people grovel at their power. But their time is short and their judgment will come. Perhaps in this world, if not certainly in the next. But Jesus is King. Jesus is King. He is righteous. He is beautiful. He is glorious. He is holy. He is perfect. He is the one who never sinned. He is the one who is worthy of our praise. He is the one who is worthy of our adoration. He is the one who is worthy of the service of our lives. And he loves us and he will care for us. So decide today. Decide to follow Jesus. Place your life in the hands of the one who is in control. And live a life of peace and fulfillment. There will still be moments when it will feel like Gethsemane. There still will be moments of betrayal and pain. But ultimately there will be victory and glory in him and eternal joy in God in heaven.